This is the UX Ladder Conversations Beyond Pixels, a deep dive into product cultures, inclusion, and the untold stories that shape experiences and trends. Hi, everyone. Meet the multi talented Soraya Nukunkit, a UX designer with unmatched empathy. She also holds an advanced degree in fashion design and grows all her own vegetables. Soraya lives by the word, I never think about beauty, but when I have finished, if the solution is not beautiful, I know it's wrong. Years ago, and I've known Soraya forever, y'all, I posed a question to Soraya. If you could ask anyone anything, what would it be? To which she replied without even blinking, well, I'd ask, what made you laugh today? So, Soraya, with all of your unique experience and especially given your individual identity, can you share a defining moment that led you to UX and the incredible work you do now?
Well, thank you for all that intro. And yes, I know Marianne for a long time. So what brought me to UX? It's very very interesting question because when I enter UX field at the time, it was not called UX. So how I got to it is actually, I was in San Francisco working at this small e-commerce website company, and they were looking for someone who actually will build the front end, who can also design. And so I basically just my primary task or job function is actually to build the customer facing UI. But I ended up spending more time designing the flow, how the user might, like the user journey, that's what we call now. So it's a lot more of that, and then a lot less about like, like how the button should look, what color to use. And then I built the front end, and then I had it up to the back end engineer to work their magic. And I got pretty good feedback. So I spend more time and brain energy around that type of task. That's how I enter UX.
Wow, so you were literally UXing before it was called UX.
It precisely.
That's amazing. Okay, so I have to ask because, design and UX isn't traditionally a field POC people of color parents push for. Like, for example, I know in my family, my sister wanted to paint for a living, and my parents literally didn't even acknowledge that. They just gave her an economics textbook. So, given the more traditional expectations, and I feel like this is at large, doctor, lawyer, that sort of thing, how did your parents or your family react? Was they pushback? Did they try to understand what design and UX is?
Yeah. Thankfully, my mom did not push back, but that doesn't mean, well, let me step back. My mom doesn't know what I'm doing for a living. But she knows that I'm in tech, and like I work in front of computer, and I think she was happy that, like I don't have to walk or work in a field where it's labor intensive, and computer tech work in Silicon Valley sounds great. So she was open for it. That's like very fortunate from someone coming from like an Asian culture background.
That's awesome. I have to ask Soraya. So when I recently, last year, my mom was in town and she was like, okay, tell me what you do. And I was like, well, you use this app and that app. And when I showed her, when I said that, her first question was like, well, why don't you work at Facebook? Did your mom
Ah,
want to know that?
yes. I got similar action when I decided to leave Adobe, and my mom was like, what are you thinking? Are you leaving this like big stable firm for a startup with less than 100 people? Like, why did you do that? They only
Yeah.
know like big names.
Yeah. How did you answer that?
I said it was a better opportunity for me. It's a way for me to grow because the company is smaller and I will make more impact.
Okay. That's the answer. And it's also just so relative, right? Like company size, you have to think about what works for you as an individual as well, I would think. Um,
Absolutely.
So, thanks for sharing that. You talked a little bit about how you came into UX, and back then it wasn't even called UX. Can you talk to us a little bit about your first quote UX job? What was it, and what do you think you are really good at when you think strictly about UX?
Yeah. So this again, it's a small startup company in San Francisco called Context Optional, where I met Mariam. That was my first UX job. I did not do a lot of coding then. And we basically built an enterprise analytics tools for marketers to listen to the social media data. And this is when like Twitter, Facebook, like all this was like at their peak. And so some, marketer has to make sense of like what that means in terms of like, budget and like decision into what channel to invest in. And that's kind of like when I need to like step in, understand like the user mindset and whatnot. And to answer your question about was I good at it? No. I it was a lot of try and error, and like especially now we have such a like there's a lot of knowledge and principle about like how to go about the UX design, how to do research. But back then it was like there was no linear path or process.
Hmm.
It was a lot of like sitting down with the customer, understand their pain point. But at the time I didn't think about like here is part of the discovery process and understand the
Yeah.
pain point. But it was more like I need to understand the person who will be using the thing I designed. And so there's a lot of that, but it was really fun.
Do you feel, just a quick follow up to that, do you feel like UX is starting to become a little bit more rigid? It's like this step and this step. And like back then, it's like, of course, you have to sit down with the customer. We'll like figure it out. Do you think something was lost in how organic it used to be?
I think so. I think a lot of newer designer kind of tend to like, here's the process, we should stick to this, or like this is what like the best practices is. But in real life, especially if you're designing for enterprise, it's you can never follow that process strictly. You have to be
Mm,
very creative. Being a designer, that's like the bottom line, is that the skill that you need to master is to be creative.
mm. I love that. The bottom line is you have to be creative. And it sounds so simple, but it's so true. Love that. Thank you. Okay, so fast forward a couple of lives later, you're currently a staff level product designer at Chronosphere, where you're building, and I have to quote this because I cannot commit it to memory, the only cloud narrative observability platform that helps teams quickly resolve incidents while controlling costs. So, from here or otherwise, what has been your biggest career win so far?
Yeah, good question. I I am grateful. Let me step back a little bit. I just came back from medical leaves, and it was a long pause in my career life, which I never did before. And the entire time I had support not only from my family member, but it's also from my boss and my team at Chronosphere. So I am grateful for working at a company that truly cares about its people and the culture. And we're building something that is very complex and it's a real world problem, but they do not forget about the people part as the process of like building this company. So it's I think that's the best thing I could hope for my career.
Yeah, that's so true, right? Because like, especially if you think about the history of the work that we do, just at tech and large, there's such a mentality of I'm plugged in all the time and it's work fast and faster and faster. And you and I both know as designers how many times we've had the conversations. Well, we want to do it better, not faster. Um, so can I really like call out to your organization? That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. You did say something in that I'd like to go back to, if that's okay, where you talked about you've never taken a break before. And in this sense, a medical break is, of course, a bit of a forced break, right? Can you
Hmm.
tell us about sort of that mindset of never taking a break? Where does that come from? Tell us more.
Yeah, I think it's a lot, for me, at least, it's a lot from Asian culture. Like you work hard, especially if you're still young and you still can work. There is no such a thing as like, oh, I'm going to take a break for like a year or two. At least in our Asian mindset, it's more of like, right now you are young and healthy, and you should harvest that like energy and like making sure that you plan for a rainy day, or like something like bigger in the future. And so unless there's like a forced stop, like medical leave or something else, then I think, otherwise, like I think, like I at least wouldn't think about like taking a break. But I do make sure that I'm taking a break throughout the year so that I don't reach that burnout um, mentality.
Yeah, that's really smart. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for the personal note as well. Really appreciate you trusting me with that. Um, so let's talk a little bit more about, switching gears a little bit, how you UX and the teams that you worked with. Just thinking, complete, let's take it to a nerd level, Soraya. When you design and when you work, I quoted in the start this like sense of beauty and deep empathy, and I genuinely mean that. I've known you for decades. You're genuinely one of the most. I know empathy is important to you, but when you're designing and in how you UX, what are the most important principles to you in the work that you do as a designer, but also as a person?
Mm, your question is always very deep. This I I think, as Maria mentioned, in the intro, that I also went to school for fashion. I definitely have this mindset from that time in fashion school also. I feel like, at least what I have learned, for more than a decade now in design field, I've learned that the design is a powerful skill. It's not only a solution to the problems, which is a famous quote, but it can also help organizations visualize the possibilities, the endless possibilities of the future. No one else, like in an organization, has this skill. Maybe some people do, but like we the master designers are the master of visualizing that possibility into the future. And I think it's a great time to be a UX designer. It's we are part of how to make organizations successful, not only for startup. You might think that like, oh, like, my company I work at, like enterprise, we've been having this company for 10 years, but you can never stop, in like innovating, and the key innovation is designers.
Yeah, I love that you said that. And I also love given because immediately when you said it's a great time to be a designer, especially a product designer, UX designer, I love that you said that because there's so much fear right now because the market isn't great, right? Like I know for me, for example, I've recently re-entered the job market and hard, right? To put it
Right.
lightly, to job hunt. I mean, a good friend has often said that job hunting is soul crushing. And I
Yeah.
know from a lot of young designers, especially young in their career, that it's a little bit difficult to put it lightly to get in the door. So I love that sort of vote of confidence. Thank you for that. Um, pulling more on sort of culture and work environment. And so this is so much on my mind because, as adults, we spend most of our waking hours at work or thinking about work, right? So it's always top of mind for me, like healthy environments and culture fit and that sort of thing is so important. And I know you know this as well as I do. In every interview, on the other side of that, people are also saying like, hey, will this person like it here? Will they like how we work and that sort of thing? But all of that said, something I'd love your opinion on as a person of color, someone with a different sounding name. Like I know lots of times people say, hey, can you say your name for me again? You and I have an accent as a minority. How has this affected your professional and personal life? And how do you work through it on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I got this question before too in different way, and I can give
Hmm.
you a specific example.
Hmm.
But to answer your question, to be honest, a lot of time I forget about how I look and sound. Or if I was the only women in the room, especially, like my field, it's like, this software is for engineers. A lot of time we're in the environment where it's like male dominant, right?
Yeah.
But instead, I tend to focus on the work that I'm delivering.
Hmm.
For example, if it's an important meeting and I'm the presenter, I need to present new ideas or like, solution to some problem for our software. And I will focus on, what message I want to deliver in this meeting, like create the mock-up that actually convey the entire story. And sometimes I would prepare and like practice the presentation with my PM, product
Hmm.
manager, or engineering lead, who is my partner,
Yeah.
that tend to help increase the confidence. I think that is like the practice part is like a must have, especially if you're
Yeah.
young in your career. The example that I wanted to give was one time I worked at, also this like technical field tools for a developer, and I was the only women entering that meeting room. This is pre-COVID, so it was an actual meeting room. And
Yeah.
I'm 5'1", everyone else is like 6 foot tall and whatnot. And one of the designer who's also female reached out to me afterward and said, how did the meeting go? How did you handle all of that? You were the only woman in the room, and I completely forgot that that was the case because I was so focusing on my presentation.
Um, I love how you sort of pull apart gender and identity and think about like, well, this is me. I mean, I also know you to be a fierce, beautiful human being, but that's that's really good advice. So thank you for sharing that because that piece about, immerse yourself in what you do and take pride in what you do. It's more about that. And if you can think through more of that, that's you sort of make space for yourself. Because I guess at the end of it, it's a lot about that.
Right. Yeah. I think let the work speak for you, right? Like,
Hmm.
and then people would just will a lot of time I think this is also something that my one of my mentors told me before that like because I was like, oh, I have accent, would they understand when I present? Like I'm not sure if I pronounce this word right. But a lot of time people they don't say it, but they actually admired us more because we have to overcome that like obstacle. Like we have to like there's more to it than just presenting the work you do when you are a
Yeah.
minority and you have accent, right? Like there
Yeah.
more to it. So if you think that like if you have that in your mind, I think as you step up and presenting, and that people actually would admire you because you actually have to like fight through this obstacle more. I think it probably will ease the nerve a little bit.
I love that because it's also like about owning it, right? And like I love that
Yeah,
message of owning it. It's like, yeah, I know it's gonna take you a minute maybe to understand what I'm saying, but I'm here and I'm representing that.
right.
Yeah, that's so I love that. It's so strong. Um, but that said, you've been in a lot of rooms and in your last couple of experiences, including this one, you've worked with um because engineering teams tend to be more male dominated, but that said, at work right now, do you see representation of race, gender, identity?
Yes, I do. It's at this company, not at every company I worked at, but at Chronosphere, it's a good mix of people from different background. We are 100% remote, so like I get to talk to people from all over the U.S., but also coming from a different background, and
Yeah.
not only just my team, design team, that has a good mix, but at a company level.
Yeah,
So I don't really feel outcast here.
that's awesome. Chronosphere sounds like a special place to work at with that in mind.
It
Um,
is.
so you worked at a lot of different places, and I want to ask you about. You said you've been in different places, and not all of them are represented as well. Do you feel that when there's a lack of representation, uh, have you seen that affect the product or company culture?
Um, I I I think so. I do. I have to say that at least in the Bay Area, right? That I think most tech company, maybe startup specifically, are aware of how important diversity is. I said that because you might have seen this award on LinkedIn and other websites that like the best place for women to work, or
Okay.
there are more options in the healthcare for all genders. So
Yeah.
this is a signal for me that like the company actually like taking a step and not just
Mm,
aware, but they actually taking a step into like, okay, making sure that they're, have all these element, because like tech world is a very competitive
yeah.
space. They need to make sure that they stay competitive so that they attract talent. So that that said, I think not every organization aware of that, and I think it comes with the culture. And I mentioned it before that this company actually like do truly care about their culture. So that's like the main thing. I think if the company, especially the leadership, really truly care about the culture and the human
Mm.
part of the process, I think we'll get a good outcome from that caring.
Yeah,
Did I
it's so
answer your
true, right?
question?
Oh, you absolutely did. Because what I'm pulling from that is when you invest in your culture and when you invest in representation across the
Right,
aisle, um, that's when you're going to have the best product, and that's when people are going to stay there. When there's a
right.
bad company culture, when there's a lack of representation, and I feel like that goes beyond just gender and identity. It's also just like identity as an introvert, identity as an extrovert, identity as whether it's
Right,
whatever your identity might be in so many different facets. I feel like it's about inclusive cultures can mean so many things.
right. Yeah.
But let's talk about UX at large. In your opinion, I'd love to learn about how do you feel it when it comes to representation, UX industry at large. What are your thoughts? Where is it headed, and what do we still need?
Where it's headed. I I mean, this day we cannot have a conversation without talking about AI. So I think
Absolutely.
that, yeah, that's definitely some, like a direction. I think it almost doesn't matter what you do, but
Yeah.
as a company or what tools, what product you're building, if you can incorporate some AI spin to it, it probably would catch some attention. This actually remind me of like, there was like a Web 2.0, and then the next thing was like everything is in the cloud, and now now we are talking about everything is like AI. So I think that
Yeah.
that's the direction. There's a lot to harvest there or not. There's a lot of argument and article talking about how bad that might be, especially toward art and design.
Mm.
Um, and what was your other question?
It was mainly about like where is it headed and what do we need
What do we need?
as a UX community when it comes to like your trend is
Yeah,
like AI and all that. What do you think we need?
yeah. I think especially as a designer, this is also another thing I've learned from fashion school. You have to be aware. It's good that you're aware of the trend, but you have to have your identity, either as a designer or to help your organization maintain the identity, not falling into trend all the time. You might have to, if I use like this fashion analogy, you might have some pieces and look that follow the trend, quote unquote, but you still have to have that garment that tells you that, I'm the Gucci, I'm the Chanel, that thing that like
Hmm.
lasted for like decades and decades. But you have some pieces that is like trendy.
Totally. Yeah, I feel that it's so easy to like go with it. So look,
Yeah.
you've obviously got a ton of experience, and honestly, there's so much me and others continue to learn from you. And you've already given us a lot of advice in this conversation, but something I feel really important and imminent to ask is what is a piece of advice that you would impart on people entering the UX field, and especially people looking for work right now when the market is so hard?
Yeah. I wish somebody told me this when I first started working. Build a good relationship with people who you work with, and find a few mentors that you truly like, like admired. I said that because when I first entered the career, like I burned some bridges, young people, we have like, yeah. So, try to hold it, build some good relationship with people who you work with. That's like important. And mentor, definitely ups and down in your career. If you have this mentor who like, truly care about you can always lean toward them.
Do you have advice on how to find a mentor? Like, for example, there's somebody who I mentor myself currently. It's a emerging designer, and they were talking all about things like should I go on ADP list? Should I hit up LinkedIn? What should I do? What do you say to folks? Like, how do you
Yeah.
go about and find the mentor?
Yeah, I think this goes back to build a relationship, the good relationship with the people who you work with, right? My mentors uh, basically came from like we used to work together,
Mm,
like I admired that person and whatnot. So now for maybe younger, just entering the UX career, um, it can always be when you go to meet up, like there used to be UX Hexagon, but I'm not sure if they are still around. You can go to meet up like that. They actually like, match you with a mentor. But
mm.
if you find the one that you really like and get along and, like click, then you should continue. Like you should continue that relationship.
That's really good advice. Thank you. In that thread of piece of advice that's specific, is there any specific advice in addition to what you've already said that you might share with underrepresented communities?
Um, Fight your fear.
Hmm.
It's that would be my advice. Like I remember I hated presenting because I worry about my accent.
Mhm.
And then I told that to my boss, and he basically just make me present almost every time we have a meeting with other.
Oh
And
no.
so you actually get over it. But because there's like, like there's like some casual meetings, but then the more you do it, the less you think
Yeah.
about it. And so I think whatever your fear, whatever that fear is, just just fight, just face it.
Yeah. That's yeah, yeah. That's there's so much to that. You've talked a lot about mentors you've had, and obviously you've gone out and gone around and like really cultivated those relationships. And in a sense, to me, mentors, what they do is they essentially hold the door open for you, right? So when I
Mhm.
say this term, holding the door for future UXers, whether it's design or research, what does this mean to you, and how do you embody it in your personal and professional life?
Yeah. This means holding the door for the future UXer.
Mhm.
To me, this means allow me as a UXer to make mistake. Like allow me to learn. I'm the type that learn by doing. And if there's, like I think maybe we mentioned it before that like it's just so strict this day. There's lots of principle, guidance, process. But I don't learn that way. I learn by like, maybe making some mistake. So if there's
Mm,
someone to help me guide that, like, okay, this is a small enough decision or small enough mistake that, not a high risk, I think that would be great. And so that's what, like, I'm doing when I mentor or like guided some new designer in our team. Basically allow them to like just go with it.
mm, I love that. Okay, I promise one last design question before I
Yeah.
like wrap this up in a second. What are you most excited about in design, UX, and tech right now?
I hate to say this, the AI. Yeah, because
Why do you hate to say it?
because it's so trendy. Everybody talked about it. But it's because I still can't think of how to incorporate it into my tools that I'm designing now, the product that I'm designing now. So it's my mind kind of keep going back to that. Basically,
Mm,
I'm like, oh, how can I make this a little bit more AI?
yeah, I feel that. Okay. So it's a trend to watch and you're excited about it. And then you're also excited because you want to know, how do I make use of this? Um,
Right. Yeah.
yeah, I see that. Okay. Um, Last-ish question. Look, what all of that said, thanks for the
Mhm.
advice and really appreciate your time. At the
Absolutely.
end, I want to acknowledge that working in tech is hard, right? It's competitive. It can be a lot of hours. The learning curve is often steep. Meeting rooms can mean all kinds of things, especially when you're underrepresented and you have an accent or you have a different name or whatever. What is the most difficult meeting you've ever been in?
Yeah. This one is easy because it's recently happened. It's basically, just imagine like new fiscal year, you have to come up with like new strategy, or like, you need to like basically like use your brain power to like illustrate the vision or the new path we're trying to enter.
Yeah,
That to me is the most difficult thing. First, you yourself, or like, your if you do practice try it, uh, framework, the PED, product engineering and design, you and your triad are not sure about this new strategy already, but you still have to present it and
mm,
get feedback, and like, make sure everybody understand, or make sure you revise, and get everybody to like excited about the strategy, and then this is going to be the plan for the rest of the year. That is the most difficult meeting I have had.
well, thank you.
Yeah.
Soraya, you are amazing. I know you as of course. Thank you so much. All of that said, to you, any parting words?
No, no. Well, you're welcome, and I'm happy to be here. And for those of you out there watching, listening to this video, um, don't be discouraged by being the minority. Use it as the advantage, because we are the unique ones. There's not a lot of us. So you don't have to work hard on that part, right? To be unique, to stand out. We already stand out. Use it to your advantage.
I love that. I'm literally going to write that on a post-it and stick it to my screen. Thank you, Soraya. Always wise, always gorgeous. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. All
Thank
right.
you.